Okay, welcome everyone to the podcast. We are members of Anonymous, and we're going to be doing a discussion today about sponsorship. What is the sponsor? How you can get a sponsor, and what a sponsor does vis-a-vis recovery. I've been joined by Rob. Rob, do you want to say hello?
Hiya guys, yeah, how you doing?
Good stuff, good stuff. Okay, so I've got some stuff I'm going to be putting up on the screens, and remember, you can rewind or pause anytime you want while you're watching this. So just now I've got meetings up on the screen. These are just some of the meetings. There are hundreds of Anonymous meetings every single week, and you're welcome at them all, folks. So please come along. And also, if you go into a Zoom meeting, don't ever feel you need to put the camera on. You know, usually a quarter of the folk there have the camera on. You know, you're not obliged to put your camera on, nor are you obliged to even talk. You just want to go along and listen. So by all means, I'd heartily suggest getting to a meeting and listen from recovering addicts, how they got and stayed clean. So let's see what else we've got here. So I've got a couple of pamphlets. The first one is this one here from ca.org, which is a great website where you can learn about recovery. They've got all kinds of information and pamphlets on there. So, Rob, I just thought, shall we share in general terms for a minute or so, you know, about recovery, the 12 steps, before we get into our discussion about sponsorship?
Yeah, can do, Paul. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, all yours.
I mean, I'm Rob. I'm a recovering cocaine addict. I'm just coming up to 5 months clean and sober. I've been in the program about 7 months, but had a couple of relapses at the start. Couldn't quite get the program myself. You know, that's the honest truth. Not everybody gets it straight away. But once I got it, and I actually, funnily enough, I got it because of my sponsor. You know, I changed sponsors, and the sponsor that I still currently have today, Philip, just put it all to me in a different format, in a different sort of language, as you know, so to speak, and just made it so that I could understand it, you know, layman's terms sort of thing. Because the book is a little bit complicated sometimes. You know, it has words in it that you know, are from the 1930s that we just don't use anymore. So you know, some things need to be picked up and explained, and you know, he did that amazingly and made it just possible for me to understand in every way and in everyday living. You know, I did my 12 steps with my sponsor in 43 days, which some people would say is quick, some people would say is about average, you know. And yeah, we went through it, you know, quickly and thoroughly. The sponsorship line and group that I come from, which is Richmond Group in London, believe in doing it one way and one way only, and that is the original way, and it's just done very, very thoroughly, you know, quickly and thoroughly, to get you on the road to recovery as quickly as possible, without skipping or missing anything. And you know, I can honestly say, doing it that way worked for me, you know. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how much more you want from me, Paul, on that side of things. But
well, I think that's very thorough, Rob. My screen is just going south on me. Hold on a moment. No, absolutely. You know, the transformation happens first. In the first instance, we've got to get clean, and then we've got to learn to live clean. Would that be right? You know,
yeah, totally.
And that means dealing with the thinking. It means crossing that bridge into normal living. It means finding a new way to live. I mean, our promise is freedom. You know, our message is hope and our promise is freedom, that an addict, any addict, can quit using, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. That's our promise.
Mm.
Now, for some reason, my screen's messing around. Just hold on, Rob. So, you know, we can get clean and we can stay clean. You know, the 12 steps are designed for living, whereby we can deal with the alcoholic mind or the addictive reasoning. You know, in a few moments, once we've gone through this pamphlet, I'm going to be putting up another pamphlet, which is actually been written by Alcoholics Anonymous Fellowship. So I just want to clarify, in our podcast, you'll often see material from Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, alcohol is a drug, alcoholism is addiction. And, you know, we recover from the disease of addiction, don't we? We free and we can stay free. So the 12 steps are a way up and out of the disease of addiction and a new way to live. You know, now it's highly suggested that a person gets a sponsor. So, you know, that's what we're going to be talking about today, sponsorship. Well, a sponsor in the English sense, it's simply someone that supports you, someone that's got your back. You know, now in 12-step recovery terms, as you've already described, Rob, it's someone who is armed with the facts about active addiction and armed with the facts about recovery, and is able to guide you through the 12-step process so you can have your own change of perceptions and get free and stay free from active addiction, and learn to live life clean, learn to you know, to face life square on, clean and sober.
Yeah, it's a bit like having it's a bit like having a big brother or big sister, you know, or an uncle or an auntie, to support you. You know, sometimes my sponsor Phil was like my dad. Sometimes he's like my brother. Sometimes he's like my mate. You know, he fills sort of all of the positions that I need him to fill when I need it, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
You know, and we've become really, really close and really good friends, you know. And from the start, I would have never believed that, because he was a right old taskmaster, and you know, it wouldn't take any of my BS. You know, and I thought, I'm never going to get on with this bloke. He's so strict, you know, but he was strict for a reason, you know, and it was to not let me make excuses, you know. So
yeah, absolutely. And you know, calling people out on their deluded reasoning is one of the things a sponsor does. Chiefly in the first instance, if you're listening to this and you're struggling with drugs, you can get clean, you can stay clean, you can find a new way to live. That's my first point. You know, these 12 steps are way up and out, are designed for living, that really, really worked. We use the book Alcoholics Anonymous, often called the Big Book. We use a book called The 12 and 12. We use a book called Hope, Faith and Courage. You know, we use a book called The Quiet Peace. I'm going to be putting up a screen with some of the books on it later. So by all means, get some literature. You know, so what are the steps? Well, the steps are a way. In step one, we take a thorough look at the realities of active addiction. We will often write a list of unmanageability, a list of consequences. You know, and we'll take a real honest look at the realities of active addiction, and the sponsor will read that through with you, so you can get a thorough understanding of step one of powerlessness around drugs. When we take that first one, all bets are off, and we just can't stop it. It's that mental obsession keeps us locked in that physical allergy where we just can't stop using. You know, we get locked into that situation where using is our solution, and you know, whether we're happy, whether we're sad. And a sponsor understands these things, that they're armed with the facts. You they've stayed clean for a while. They have a knowledge of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. They have a knowledge of the 12 and 12, and they're able to guide you through this process. I mean, I like what it says here on this pamphlet that's on the screen. It says they're not professional counselors. They're not legal, psychiatric, or medical practitioners, nor are they employers. It's about guiding someone through these 12 steps so they can have their own spiritual experience sufficient to liberate them from the desire to get drunk and high all the time. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's, my sponsor basically has not just guided me through the steps, but also made me make some life decisions as well. Just from life experience, me and him are only, I think, a couple of years apart. Age-wise, he's a couple of years older than me. But still, I sort of look up to him, even though we're only a couple of years difference. I look up to. He's got a lot of wisdom and a lot of knowledge. He's just a general all-round guy. He's the biggest advantage is that when you're looking for a sponsor, you want to be looking for someone that has got a good grasp of the book, of the steps, and knowledge, and it doesn't matter if they've got a huge amount of sobriety. They don't have to be 30 years for you to get your best chance.
Yeah.
I know some sponsors that are fresh out the box, literally fresh out the box. But they talk the talk, and it's real talk. They know exactly what it's like because they've just been through it themselves. They've got the confidence to be able to take on somebody as a sponsee. Because a lot of people, when you've done your 12 steps and you become available for sponsorship, it's a pretty frightening place. You're looking at somebody else relying on you, for knowledge and experience, and that's quite daunting. When you've got this fine balance of life and death within addiction, it can be quite a scary thing. But I know sponsors that are, some are 5 years, 10 years, some are a few months, and they are just as strong as each other. You've got to look at the person that you're picking as your sponsor on a completely individual basis. You can't sort of look at one person against another. It just doesn't work like that. Everybody has their different strengths and things. So yeah, but I'm sure we'll go into that in a bit more detail.
Absolutely. For me, sponsorship is about staying close. You know what I mean? You make an agreement to go through the 12 steps with someone. You discuss the parameters, the availability of the person. Perhaps one party's working, perhaps the other party's not. Perhaps both people work. You agree a general time frame. You agree the literature you're going to use and make sure you both got the same literature. And you get in the process of going through the step work. Now on some of the other videos we've discussed the step work. If this is your first time you've clicked on one of our podcasts, we've done one on each of the steps, as well as an introduction to Cocaine Anonymous, the program, and the fellowship. So what is sponsorship? Well, a sponsor is someone that will actually take you through the 12 steps. What does that look like? Well, I'll give you an example. In step 1, I've got about 15 questions, Rob, that I'll send somebody, and they'll actually put pen to paper and write down the question, and they'll write their answer, whether it's a line or 3 paragraphs to each question, and then they'll take a picture and send them me on WhatsApp, Rob. And then we will talk through everything they've written. they will have also read step 1 out of the 12 and 12. They will also have read the doctor's opinion. I will answer any questions, or try to answer any questions they have around any of that literature, Rob. For me, step 1's really important. Only when I'm sure they've got an understanding of powerlessness, unmanageability, and consequences am I happy to move to step 2. And I base that on my experience, Rob, of being around these rooms a little while and having worked with various blokes and some women, in this process, and seeing people get free, and unfortunately seeing people relapse. I mean, it's a life or death business. Sponsorship's a real serious business. For me, it's a private and personal connection. You would never get any information about any of my sponsees out of me, Rob.
Yeah, I'm the same.
No, whatever they tell me is between us.
Yeah.
I just do. I'm a bit of an old stickler myself, Rob. I don't even like people to know who my sponsees are. Once we've gone through the 12 steps, they can say what the hell they like. But during that process, I think it's really important to stay close, keep it simple, and keep it private and discreet, because you're looking sometimes at the steps in really important things. You know what I mean? When it comes to step 1, 4, and 8 particularly, you're looking at personal, private things. So it's important you get a sponsor you feel you can trust. It's important, I think, for sponsees to be clear in their expectations of the sponsor. I think the preliminary conversation is important. I'm not obliged to sponsor everyone that asks me to sponsor them, Rob, right? Nor is a sponsor obliged to take me on as a sponsor having started that conversation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I've had exactly the same experience myself. I started with one chap, and things just would not and could not work out between us. We thought we had a sort of a common bond at the start, and then his work commitment started to get in the way of things. The way that I was taught is, like I say, not militant, but quite strong, the way that they do things. And, I promised to do it exactly the same way as I was shown. And, one thing led to another. It just didn't work out between us, which is a real shame. But you can't force something that's not there, especially when you get to sort of steps 4 and 5 and then doing amends at 8 and 9. If you don't have that complete bond between you, like brothers, like a father-son, like a auntie and niece, for the ladies, and if you don't have that bond between you, you're going to potentially go through some pretty dark stuff, when it comes to putting everything down, putting it down on paper and getting honest with God. You're going to go through some dark stuff, and if you don't have that, then it's going to be very difficult.
And it's a very real thing. I mean, I think you and I are singing from the same hymn sheet, Rob. I think it's a serious business. I think it's about getting into the work promptly. And before we made this podcast, I was thinking, there's probably folks that have been around the rooms a while who'll listen to this and might disagree, and that's completely fine. I just want to say I'm not a spokesman for CA. I'm just a member sharing my opinion, my experience, and my understanding. There are different ways to sponsor. In fact, there's various ways to sponsor. The main thing for me is that someone gets into the process and promptly gets through the work. When I'm taking blokes through all this work, let's get into the process. Do you know what I mean? I like to get the whole thing done in less than 5 weeks, thoroughly. If someone had an illness, you wouldn't say, well, I know where the cure is, but you'll be all right. Just wait a few weeks. You'll be all right. No, get them the cure. This is serious business.
I think I think with any method, you know, like you said, you know, we're not spokesmen for CA. We're just giving our experience.
Yeah.
I think what works for one man might not work for another.
Yeah.
You know, and you can slightly tailor your approach as you go through the process, and you're working with that person. You know, you can work out, you know, even down to silly things like, do they listen on early mornings? You know, is it being taken in? Because if not, let's do it in the afternoon or the evening. So you sort of tailor make a little bit, but then it is all about discipline, and you know, you're learning a new way of living as well. You know, if somebody's not working, then it's about sort of getting them up in the morning, getting their head back on the thought of get up and have a process for the day, rather than just staying in bed all day and then you know doing it a bit later. You know, and the methods as well, the methods of sponsorship. You know, you may do it slightly differently to me, but the proof is in the pudding. You know, and if someone stays clean and sober, then that process has worked for them.
Absolutely.
It's simple as that.
I like what you said, Rob, about practical suggestions. You know, and very often, whilst the prime thing is to get through each step thoroughly and in order, you know, so that the candidate, the sponsor, has a thorough understanding of each step and what's involved. Also, there's a lot of practical wisdom that's shared. As you say, every day we need purpose, connection, expression. We need to suit up and show up for life. You know, if someone has said to you and me, oh, there's a bag of dope going to be, you know, the guy's going to be there at 3 p.m. with a bag of dope for you at the right price, good stuff, you'd have been there, no questions asked.
I'd have been there at 1:45.
And so it is with recovery. You know, what we have on offer is life and strength and peace, and the healing of family relationships.
Yeah.
You know, a degree of sanity and health, a better future.
Yeah, you know, I mean, there's two things that I say to everybody within sponsorship is, once you start this program, don't stop. Keep your foot on the gas. You know, literally, once you've got the momentum going, you may as well see it through to the end and get it done. You know, and that's, you and I both work on quite a quick steps. And I've forgotten what the second one was. Oh God, my mind's gone blank completely.
Yeah, it's okay. It'll come back to you, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, it will do. It will.
So I mean, you know, you brought up a really important point, actually, Rob. The practical wisdom that we share as sponsors with folks wanting to get free and stay free from active addiction, and not only that, persons that have been through 12 steps, perhaps after 3, 4, 6, 8 months, they might want to do another round of steps, which is perfectly normal. So it might be someone that hasn't picked up drugs again, that's managed to stay clean, that wants to go through the steps again. You know, and it's this practical wisdom, you know, but generally, it's usually someone that's fresh out of active addiction, and they've got to learn how to live without drugs, without medicating their feelings, without treating the wounds of life with drugs.
Yeah.
You know, they've got to change people, places, and things. They've got to get rid of phone numbers. They've got to ditch friends that are still using, or at least avoid them, or, you know, find ways to explain to them where they're at getting clean and that they need to back off for a little while. You know, they've got to make changes to stay clean. And a sponsor will have lots of experience around these issues because they've been working with people in this process for very often quite a while. So a sponsor will share their experience, which is what you said earlier. You know, not just their pontificating, but actually their experience.
And they're there also to be a friend. Sorry to.
No, right.
They're there to be a friend, because it's a bloody lonely place when you've got to cut all those ties.
Aye.
You know, and we understand that, because, you know, as a sponsor, we've done it ourselves. You know, and it really can be lonely when, you know, because a lot of your people in your phone book or circle of friends that are users and are still using, they're still in active addiction because they don't want to give up, or they feel they don't need to, you know. You've suddenly got to start cutting ties with these people, because otherwise you're dragged back in that same circle, and it just makes things impossible.
Well, I think
you know,
good. Sorry, carry on.
yeah, and you know, it's you know, the sponsor shouldn't just bring you their guidance and their sponsorship, but you know, we've got our own like WhatsApp page, which is for all the sponsees and sponsors. You know, and any questions or friendships and things can be made. You know, I've literally got a whole new group of friends through this program, you know, and they're a group of friends that I trust and have integrity, and they're not going to rob me, you know, for their next fix, you know, and all of that stuff. You know, it's nice to finally be able to fall back on friendship where I can trust them, you know, and know that they're there for me.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think it's really important to stay close. You know, I do say that to blokes, look, stay close, you know, at least until we've got through the 12 steps, and stay in touch. And I like what you say, Rob. It can be a lonely place, you know, and a sponsor will have access to resources, and other sponsees, other folks that have got through this process and imagine to stay clean, and can often put them in touch one with another. A sponsor will know what meetings are good to go to. A sponsor will know where to get literature from. A sponsor will be able to explain how to work the fellowship, not just work the program, work the fellowship.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing you said about, you know, sort of putting effort in and that daily living. I've just remembered what I was going to say, and it was what my sponsor said to me. He said, he said, think of an average day when you had no money, you were in active addiction, and you had to find the money and find your dope to get your fix. If you can put 10% of the effort in that you had to scrabble around finding money, go and do some shoplifting, do this, do that, crime, whatever you had to do to find the money to find the fix, if you can put 10% of that effort into the program, you'll absolutely smash it.
Got it.
You know, and that is so true, so true. I think it might have taken me the whole day to find 50 quid to go and buy a bag. And, you know, I can do an hour's worth of work and accomplish so much more than finding 50 quid to go and buy a bag of Coke and get high. You know, it's amazing. You know, it is amazing.
I mean, a sponsor is like a man or a woman that's been brought into the light out of the darkness, and is able to explain the light, which expels the darkness.
Yes.
You know, you know, and he's able to assure and comfort them that the juice is worth the squeeze.
Their experience, strength, and knowledge that they have learned through their recovery and taking sponsees and etc. through the steps, it's like somebody that can just come and, like, if you're sat in a very dark room, or even if you think of it like a prison cell, you're locked in that horrible darkness, and they just come in and open the door and switch the light on.
Yeah, exactly.
It's your choice if you take their hand and you walk out of that room with them.
Well, that's right. And then, you know, out of the many metaphors and ways to describe this thing, here's one of them. You know, you've got sponsorship, the fellowship, and the program. And you could go in further and say, and the meetings, but in the meetings, you experience the fellowship of Cocaine Anonymous. You will hear about sponsorship. You will hear about recovery. You will hear about step work. You will hear how to get free from act addiction, how to stay free from act addiction. You will hear how other people have found a daily solution. But that isn't really the program. That's part of the program. But the program is found in the first 164 pages of a book called Alcoholics Anonymous, which we often call the Big Book. That is the program of action. Now you will hear about that program and you will learn about that program in the fellowship, in the meetings. But what we declare is that we must have a personal program of action. Would that be right, Rob?
Totally. It's, like I say earlier, it's about getting up in the morning, starting your day right, prayer, meditation, page 86. And then not just going back to bed, oh God, I used to be so lazy, especially when I had depression with using as well. And now, I'm up, I'm prompt, I'm up. I do the school run in the morning, take my kids to school, do my prayer, meditation, everything before that, have some breakfast, actually get some breakfast. And then as soon as I've done and I've dropped the kids at school, I'm on the phone. And I'm reaching out to other fellows, reaching out to my sponsee and my sponsor. And it's just a process you learn. And I was thinking about this the other day. If you're going to have an addiction, which we probably will have some sort of an addiction because we are addictive personalities, then CA is not a bad bloody addiction to have. Because at the end of the day, if I'm still going to be an addict, Paul, and I'm still going to be into something that I can't sort of stop doing, I don't mind doing podcasts every day. I don't mind doing sharing. I don't mind ringing a few fellows. I don't mind designing some new flyers and stuff for PI. That it's all good things that are going to come out of this addiction. So if I'm going to have one, I'll have CA. They should put it in pill form, maybe.
I mean, really, what we're talking about is alcoholism. Addiction is alcoholism. A drug is a drug. The problem is alcoholism, addiction. That's the problem. And a sponsor has a certain amount of knowledge about alcoholism. Now, when we say alcoholism, Rob, we're talking about the underlying condition that keeps a man or a woman locked in that cycle of living to use and using to live. A sponsor understands alcoholism, the negative reasoning, the inner critic, that part of the human mind that's unable to bring with sufficient force the consequences of active addiction to recollection with sufficient power for us to choose not to use, right? I mean, you mentioned relapse. Relapse was very, very much part of my story, Rob. Very, very much, let me tell you, and it was not pleasant. You know what I mean? Being clean, and it was often the social setting. And now, having been clean for a little while, Rob, I've got a little bit of understanding around it. It's very often that social setting, mates, so-called mates and pals. Well, I mean, let's face it, most addicts begin their addiction in the social setting by being around other people that are addicted, right? And it's that peer pressure, if you like. So one of the prime things in recovery is we need to change people, place, and things. If you sit around in the barbers, sooner or later you'll get a haircut. And so we have to take practical steps not to be around drugs. Whether it's liquid dope, a pill, powder, potion, or rot, whatever your poison is, you need to avoid the poison usually to get and stay clean, particularly in early recovery. So a sponsor has a wealth of information and will also have his own support group and sponsor to reach out to if there's questions that they don't have the answers to. That's another thing. You know, a sponsor will be someone that's in the middle of the boat. They themselves will have their own support group. They themselves will have their own spiritual journey. They themselves will be doing service in meetings. You know, so you kind of tapping into a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of truth and a wealth of experience. Now, sponsors ain't perfect. You know what I mean? This is the other thing. You know, I'm careful not to give advice. I'm not a marriage counselor. You know what I mean? Or a doctor. You know, this is about alcoholism, getting clean and staying clean, and learning to live life clean.
Yeah. That reminds me, actually, saying that of something my sponsor said to me, which is I was having a bit of a row with my wife, and we had our morning call, and I was moaning about it, and he you know, this is the sort of the truth that a sponsor needs to sort of be truthful with you and quite strong sometimes. And he said, and I'll cut the swearing out. He said, Rob, I'm not a marriage counselor. I'm your sponsor. Yeah. And you know, take it to a marriage counselor if you've got a problem with your wife. I'm here to stop you from taking drugs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, that was straight. You know, absolutely. And I said, oh yeah, sorry, Phil. Yeah, right. Yeah, let's get back to it, because my mind was just, you know, not on the program at the moment. It was thinking about the row that I was having with my wife, you know. So, you know, but then there's been other times where he's been very, very compassionate. You know, he just knows. He knows when to do the right things, and that's what I've always appreciated with him. He's been very straight with me, but I know that it is through caring as well. Yeah. You know, me and my sponsor would have never ever have crossed paths with each other unless I was potentially robbing his warehouse for one of his businesses or stealing his Maserati. You know, he's lucky. He's done very well in life since he found the clean way of living. You know, and we laugh about that because we say, my God, you know, we would have got on like a house on fire if we were friends, you know?
Yeah. And I think as well, Rob, it's important to point out, you know, that a sponsee, it's completely voluntary. There's nothing to sign, no promises to make.
Yeah.
You know, there's no money involved at all. It's completely altruistic and voluntary. Do you know what I mean? And for me, it's a case of getting through the 12 steps promptly and thoroughly.
Yeah. I said to a young man once, because I've heard stories of some rogue people that were charging for sponsorship and, you know, for giving you a clean way of living, and I was appalled by it. And I was just chatting to one young guy that was looking for a sponsor, and I said to him as plainly, as simply as possible, I said, are you working? He said, yeah. I said, have you got a bit of money around you? He said, yeah. I said, drive a nice car? He said, yeah. I said, house, wife, kids? Yeah. I said, I don't want any of that. So get it out your head now that you think I'm an ex-criminal and I'm going to weasel my way in and I want something from you. I said, there is something that I want from you, but it's none of those. And he said, well, what do you want from me? I said, to see you get well and clean.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, wow. Yeah. You know, I said, that's all I want. And that's all any sponsor should want, to see that next man, next woman get free of addiction, because, you know, we know the pain. We know how lonely and miserable and horrible it is in addiction. And we want to see you come out the other side and live the life that we're living, which is, you know, happy, joyous and free.
Yeah. And I mean, the next thing is where do you meet a sponsor? Where do you, and I know that some of the pamphlets I've been going over while we're talking on the screen, Rob, cover this question, but just to cover it live for the listeners, you know, where do you find a sponsor, Rob?
Well, many ways now. I mean, I'm a Zoom baby, so I sort of finished my addiction during lockdown, and I met my first sponsor at a meeting, which is where you would generally meet a sponsor at a face-to-face meeting, because it's good to listen to them share, get some experience from them by talking to them face-to-face. But I was recommended by a friend of mine from a meeting onto Philip, my sponsor now, because he knew I needed somebody strong. And he said, look, this guy's from the Richmond group. They're a really strong fellowship. Why don't you ring him and have a chat? He was my sponsor years and years ago. And, he's amazing. And we started from there. But, Zoom meetings, forums, WhatsApp chat groups.
Yeah.
People put their numbers in the chat, saying they're available for sponsorship. I mean, on your meeting, Paul, that you do the list of recognized sponsors that you check out regularly and sort of not vet, but you make sure that they're still good for sponsorship and they're up for sponsorship,
Correct.
And so and word of mouth, speak to somebody that you phone rang just as I was speaking. Look to somebody that's a peer or someone that you trust,
Yeah. I mean, absolutely, Rob. I mean, I'm going to be putting up the meetings list again, or a meetings list in a few minutes again on the screen for folks. And I mean, online meetings are modelled on face-to-face meetings. At a face-to-face meeting, you would get to know folks in the meeting, and they may well offer to take you through the 12 steps. Now, obviously, on a Zoom meeting, it's not face-to-face, but you can still hear people share and decide by listening to their message of hope, faith, courage, and freedom if that's something you want. If you like their take on recovery, how they express themselves, how they sound, what they talk about, you can ask them to sponsor you in Zoom meetings. And I'd encourage any listeners to get along to a Zoom meeting. You don't have to put your camera on, you don't have to speak, you can just listen. If you want to share, you can share. Yeah. And very often persons will put in the chat box their number and they'll put available for sponsorship. So you would basically phone. I mean, I've decided I'm not going to put our sponsorship lists upon this podcast, Rob, but if anyone comes along to the meetings, they will see the sponsorship list, male and female. And we do suggest males with males and females with females. But yeah, absolutely. And it's a really important part of recovery. Can you work the 12 steps on your own? Well, people do. We suggest that you go through the 12 steps with a sponsor, an experienced sponsor.
Yeah. They're there to answer the questions that you can't answer yourself. Yeah. If you're trying to do it on your own, it might work for you, but I wouldn't say that you're getting the depth of the book and the meanings and stuff unless you've got somebody that is well versed and has gone through it themselves.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So I'm just thinking if our listeners would have any other questions, Rob. I'm particularly thinking of newcomers or anyone that's just clicked on this, who's never been to Cocaine Anonymous, no experience of the meetings, the program. What do you think they would need to hear?
That's a tricky one. Trying to think of the questions that I would have asked. I mean, especially regarding sponsorship, you want to speak to somebody. I would always recommend you try and listen to someone share, like a main share where they're sitting down and giving half an hour, a bit like this podcast, giving half an hour of their honest truth. Because you learn so much from someone by listening to them share. You get an idea of their background, their childhood, anything that's gone wrong with them through their earlier years. Their experience of the program and how they did it, and things like relapse and stuff like that. It gives you an identifier with them. If there's you sort of want to be ticking off ticking off boxes on a list, to out of 10 questions, you really want to be looking at least 8 or 9 or 10 ticked off with the correct answer for you to select them as a sponsor. If you don't have that sort of faith in them, and you have nothing that you recognize between you as something in common, then it can be a little bit difficult. So don't rush into picking a sponsor. I made that mistake. I rushed in thinking I've got to find help as quick as possible. Picked the guy, lovely guy. Absolutely. I mean, I would never take anything away from the guy. Smashing guy. We just did not click. And that's because I jumped in so fast, and he was more than willing to help me, but it just didn't work out between us. So just take your time, but don't hang around.
Take your time and hurry up. I think the thing is as well, I mean, as it says on the screen there, every member is perfectly free to arrive at an individual understanding of the program, and it's a personal program of action is what we develop. But when we first come in, we might be very confused. We might have masses of consequences: marital, financial, spiritual, mental, criminal, all kinds of consequences when we first go into recovery. So we're very often confused and deluded and wondering what the hell's going on. And so a sponsor will coach you and guide you through the 12 steps, so you can develop your own understanding of the program, have your own spiritual experience, your own personal awakening around the realities of step 1, for example, the powerlessness, the consequences. And when you're honestly presented with the consequence of active addiction, it empowers you. I'm not sure I'd like to say knowledge is power, but you once you're presented with the reality in step 1 of the consequence of the unmanageability of active addiction, you realize that you cannot use successfully. It is just too destructive, and so you've got to stay away from that first one. It's that first one that ruins everything.
And you should be able to feel, every sponsor will say, if you're thinking about ringing your drug dealer, ring me first and make sure that let's talk it through before you go and do anything silly, like a relapse. It's quite a difficult one because you don't really want to call your sponsor because it's going to spoil your party. But once you have that sort of love and trust and stuff for your sponsor, you will feel so guilty by doing anything that you shouldn't be doing, because you sort of class them, you class them as a friend. It's like you're cheating on your sponsor. So it works that way as well.
Absolutely, and and I think for many persons, a sponsor is like the beginning of a support group. One of the other things we suggest folks get a support group of around 4, 5, 6 folks, and they keep an eye on the support group because people change fellowship, pick up again. You don't always click with everybody, and a support group, someone in a support group is just a bloke who you kind of get on with it. You can give him a bell if you're struggling and you just want to talk about recovery and addiction, and and fess up and say, look, I'm thinking of using. Or what do you think about this part of the step work or this principle? I mean, the principles of these steps have been around for millennia. Honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, acceptance, community, the fellowship, spiritual principles, prayer, meditation. All these principles have been around for millennia. And so look, we're more or less coming to the end of the podcast now, Rob. So I'm just thinking what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up the list of meetings You know, so have you anything that you'd like to say in summation, you know, regarding sponsorship, Rob, to our listeners?
Yeah, well, just basically to reiterate, you know, don't don't rush into grabbing a sponsor because you're desperate. You know, only rush in if it's the fact that you think that they might be snapped up by someone else and you really really want them. You know, otherwise, take your time, pick the right person, and try to find some similarities between you, your story, your using, your background, where you live, things like that, you know. Yeah, and I mean, I'm saying this, but I completely contradict myself when I picked Philip, because we've never met. I wouldn't have had anything in common with the guy when we first got in touch with each other. But it's worked out amazingly and worked out perfectly. So, you know, you just got to make an educated decision, you know. If I gave you the choice of 10 people to hang around with that were horrible, stole your money every day, beat you up, and treated you like rubbish, or I gave you 10 people that care for you, call you, and want the best for you, which one would you choose? You know, it's as simple as that, really.
So look, that's been really, really good, Rob. I think what I would just say to add to what we said is one, you know, this is by no means an exhaustive podcast on this subject. I'm sure you and me could talk all day long about sponsorship.
Oh, yeah.
Nor am I saying that, you know, that there's not more can be added to any of the points raised. What I would say, if anyone's got any questions, comments, or thoughts, put them in the comments down below. Please like and subscribe and join the channel. There's other videos on the other steps as an introduction to CA. On the screen now is a meetings list. There are hundreds of meetings. These are just some of the meetings. If you have a look at this, folks, on the screen, We Can Recover is on twice a day, every day. Most of them are on Zoom nowadays. We Can Recover is on 2 p.m. and 8 p.m. UK time every single day, which is 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. if you're on the East Coast of America. On the top left, pop-up recovery is on every morning at 10:30 a.m. And on Zoom. At the top right, reaching out every night of the week, 11 p.m. Underneath that, daily reprieve every night at 9:30. And I know, Rob, you've helped out and started a new meeting that's on every Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday at
9 p.m.
We're going to have to get added to this list at some point.
Yeah, a life worth living.
Living, yeah.
And basically, our motto is it's a meeting by recovering addicts for addicts.
Yeah.
You know, we know how you feel. We know what you're going through. So, you know, come and chat to us.
Okay, family. Well, look, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Again, you can rewind and listen to this anytime. Please check out the other videos. Please stay connected. You can have a happier future, drug-free. Thanks so much, Rob, for coming along.
My pleasure. Absolute pleasure. And good luck to anybody starting their journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, family. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.